Welcome back to Cereal for Lunch, your favorite midday pit stop for a tasty bite of startup wisdom, or BYU Creamery chocolate milk, as it so happens. Served with a hot side of controversy. I'm Brett, the Sass Whisperer Larson, joined today by Brandon, Client Commander Wright from Client Book, Scott Snapshot Sage Smith of Zeit. That was a little long. And Chad, Mr. Distribution Ingram from Distro. Today, we're kicking off with Founder Therapy. What happens when all of your best laid plans go sideways? Then we're going to tackle the hottest markets for building your tech startup in. And yes, I did just move from Arizona to Utah. And lastly, we're going to dissect the viral tweet thread by Amjad Masad and Gurgly Oros. I totally butchered their names. No. Apologies if they ever listen, and they won't. On AI's unexpected impact across company teams. Let's jump straight into Founder Therapy. Okay, so guys, we've all been in a position where we're building. We have this amazing opportunity in front of us. Maybe it's a gigantic enterprise deal. Maybe it's a round of funding. Maybe it's an acquisition offer. And then it feels like in startups, like you have three things happen incredible in a day, and then that afternoon you get kicked in the crotch. Scott, let's start with you. What do you do?
Well,
how do you navigate? How do you manage? How do you what do you do?
Okay, so like I want to talk about like the part where you just feel like you can't handle it anymore, and it's just been like there's just been so much. So when I lived in California, Brett, like you, I moved to Utah probably 2 years ago. I actually installed a punching bag in my garage next to my. I had like a phone call booth. I bought it during COVID 2020, so I could work in my garage and have some quiet space. And when I had one of those horrible, terrible moments of like, oh, the deal fell through or the funding wasn't going to come in or whatever, I just went out and went absolutely mad crazy attacking that. And then I was able to settle down, and I don't know, sometimes there were some tears, but for the most part, I just realized that there's going to be many other opportunities if I just kind of stayed with it.
I wish you had like a camera in your garage and you just had like snapshots of that, because that'd be kind of a fun thing to watch.
Oh, I do. I'll send some pictures later. It's just like horrible dark garage with a phone booth.
I want to meet Angry Scott one day.
Maybe we should all just go to Scott's house and just watch him hit the punching bag.
Just observe for a while.
I mean, it's just like see how long you can go. Just keep going until you're physically, it's like drained.
Shirt off if that's okay too. So we have the full experience.
Well, all right.
Chad, how about you? Okay. What's maybe let's get specific. What's the biggest big thing that's happened, and like how did you react? What did you do about it?
I mean, there's not just one big thing. It just happens, right? Like it just continues to happen, and I don't know, and I don't mean that like anything specifically at the moment has happened to do that, but literally like every other day, just it's the cliche of a roller coaster. But earlier on in my career as an entrepreneur, I think it felt worse. I think over time there's this stress muscle in your ability to weather things increases. Mostly because like the first time you get a legal letter scares the crap out of you, and later you're like, file it in the trash can kind of thing. You know what I mean? And just because it's probably not that big of a deal, or like an investor early on makes a commitment and doesn't follow through, and you're like, oh my gosh, how on earth did they lie to me? And then later you're like, everyone's a liar till the wire hits the bank, right? So there's some stuff I think that gets better over time, but still it can get you. I have a friend that like, there was a really particular time in like 2018, I was raising a bridge round and the sky was falling, even though lots was going well. And he showed up at my office with a Red Bull, which is what I like, still on brand. And he's like, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, not good. And he's like, what's particularly wrong? I'm like, well, nothing in particular, Well, like I could, yeah, it seemed like everything, but like I couldn't give him this like we we're going out of business tomorrow, basically, is what he was saying. And I was like, that's true. We got time. And so he's like, dude, the demons, they come. They come for you at night. They come for you when you're alone. They come for you right after you had a meeting with your team and it felt weird. They come when, you get an email from somebody who doesn't see your vision like you do, which newsflash, that's like 98% of people don't really see eye to eye with what you're trying to do. So anyway, rambling a bit, but like I think over time it's definitely gotten better. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing or like just an experience thing, but when it does happen, because it does, I like to go for a drive actually. It's kind of weird, but like I just like to have a minute, just have a minute to kind of clear my thoughts, work myself through it, feel it, because that's also okay, I think, and then just go handle it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, real quick, if I could just share like an experience, right? And this isn't the only time this has happened, right? It's just one that was really clear, where I thought everything was wrapped up, ready to go. I mean, it's March of 2020, right? Timeline makes sense to everyone. I'm literally on the last iterations, like the last round of back and forth between the lawyers for closing a round. We're running out of money. Everything's looking like it's going to close. I'm actually in Spain at the time, and I'm on the phone with these investors like, hey, the last round of red lines is in your lawyer's hands. Like, he just has to approve it. You guys still good on this, even though this was like right after Trump had shut down the borders back in, for COVID. And they're like, yeah, everything's still fine. It's not a problem. We're good. We're ready to go. And then, in fact, the very next week, I was supposed to be out there with them, and we're going to go on a road show to close the rest of the round. And the weekend happened. I didn't hear anything. I'm not getting anything back from them. And then the beginning of the next week, it was, hey, we're putting every investment on hold, and we're not going to close on this round. And it just completely fell apart at the very last minute. Like, to Chad's point, everyone's a liar until the wire is in the bank, and that was a big learning experience for me. But it was devastating, and I was like, what are we going to do? And I think what Scott and Chad said is really important. Like, it's okay to step back. Like, we are so involved in our businesses. Like, we are like all day, every day. That's all we're thinking about. And in those moments, all we want to do is just like jump in and try to fix it. But I think those are the moments when we actually need to step back and get some perspective first and go for a drive, like if that's what you like to do, right? Or go, punch the punching bag for a bit, or go to a movie theater, or whatever it is, like just whatever you enjoy doing outside of work. And maybe it's been a long time since you've done any of those things, so maybe you have to rediscover what that is. Go do it, and it's okay. Like, your business is going to be okay for a few hours, and then go to bed, and the next morning get up and say, okay, well, what's the next thing that I have to do? Not what's 10 steps ahead or where do I need to go? Like, what is just that first thing, and just take it a step at a time.
Brandon,
and that's been super helpful for me.
You mentioned something that is an arrow in my quiver, dude. If you need to disappear for a minute, afternoon matinee
Tijuana.
movies are maybe that too, maybe Tijuana, but afternoon movies alone are the freaking best.
Here's the thing.
Doesn't happen often.
I don't think most people realize that because if you tell the story of any business after the fact, and even if you're open about it, like, I was at the brink of death, we were going to fail, we were out of cash, we needed, like, and then you tell the rest of the story. Like, what most people don't realize, who don't build or who haven't built or who don't have a desire to, is they're like, oh, well, you just knew it was going to work out. Like, I think they believe we have this superpower of undying, like, belief that it's just going to work. And frankly, we do will it to work. Like, we figure out how to make it work. But in the moment, you don't know. Like, I remember December of 19, we did an extension on our round on the seed round at eVisit, and my favorite board member came to me. He's like, Brett, I love you, right? And I was, and I genuinely did. I knew he loved me. Like we
No
have
good conversation starts that way, though.
100% ever, right? Like this person is as close to family as you guys, but and he's like, there's no more money. The reserves we're done. Like 2020, you get profitable, you sell the business, or you're out of business. We were I'd stopped taking a salary October of that year. Bree and I had like $5,000 in our checking account, savings account. I had $100,000 on a credit card that I used to start the business. Like we were done. And like people hear that story now and they're like, yeah, but it all worked out and it worked out amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but my kids got Christmas that year because the board let me use Amex points on Amazon. Right. Like, and that's, I mean, I feel like that's honestly the reason I'm doing it again is for those moments, like the growth that comes out of being in that position and figuring it out, like the things you learn, like the evolution that occurs. There's no better platform to push you, in my opinion. Like I haven't found a better platform to push the personal growth than like putting yourself in spots where you have no other choice. Like you can't, the only way to the other side of it is through it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. You've got to just get through it. It is, most people aren't cut out for it.
One thing that I thought was pretty interesting, just really quick, just maybe to kind of follow up there is, I think there's a lot of parts of what we do where we can sort of exert control. We can exert our influence. We can work hard. We can like navigate. And then there's also just things that happen that are well outside of our control that like we just cannot do anything. Like when a customer tells you they're going to cancel and you've absolutely done everything, you just almost have to let go. When that deal falls through to acquire your company or the fund, to fund your business falls through and you lose control. I actually think that for me, I always feel like I can solve any problem. But when I no longer have the ability to influence or control that relationship, that's the one time that I think I have to step away because it's different than what I'm used to doing every day.
Well, if you're dealing with real crappy startup journey stuff, stick with it. Find a friend, go see a movie, go to Tijuana, get lost for a week.
Just stay alive long enough to get lucky.
Honestly, that is the trick. So let's shift topics. I recently made a move. I've been in sunny Arizona for the last 30 years off and on. And in starting my next company, this company, made a decision to build in a better market for software and have recently moved to Utah, Silicon Slopes. So I want to talk to you guys about like the best markets to build in. Like what are, Chad, let's start with you. Or actually Scott, do traditional tech hubs still dominate, or are emerging markets the future? Like as we look at where to build and how to build and the advantages of building in one place versus another, you spent time in Silicon Valley with the company formerly known as Facebook. What are your observations in comparing it there to Utah to any other market?
I think it totally depends on how you're approaching building your business. So for example, like if your mindset is like maybe kind of the traditional approach that Silicon Valley takes, which is you're at Harvard or MIT, you either graduate or drop out, and then you apply for Y Combinator, which is an accelerator that gives you, like let's say 150K, something like that for 7% of your business, and then you build it. And then the expectation is just to like build it for a while, get some revenue and some customers, and then raise the next round, and sort of it sequentially builds, and then you're successful. I think there's like that mindset that happens to be the Silicon Valley way. It's very, at least maybe over the last like 10, 20 years, that's where you're going to most likely be able to raise capital because Silicon Valley raises the most capital by maybe like 10 to 100x every other city almost combined across the United States. So if you're looking to, I don't know, it's kind of like, can you make it to the major leagues and be on the Yankees? I don't think most people can. I think there's a very few companies who end up being like the Yankees. I think when I was there, like I worked for a couple different companies that followed traditional and non-traditional paths, but still were very wildly successful. So anyway, that's at least my initial thought on, the Silicon Valley way. But I just think that like we've entered a time where you can be non-technical and you can sort of vibe code the first version of your product. You can start maybe without a technical co-founder to actually write the code for you, and you can get some customers. You can get yourself to kind of like ramen profitability and then maybe have some optionality. Whereas before, it just felt like you had to go through this funnel, or maybe you didn't have to, but many people felt like they had to. It's sort of like the MBA pathway, like at least in Wall Street. I'm going to graduate X school. I'm going to go to Goldman as an intern. I'm going to get my MBA. Then I'm going to work 2 years as an analyst. Then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, those are my quick thoughts, I think, on the Silicon Valley way.
What are your observations been between like building and growing in Silicon Valley and now being based in Silicon Slopes?
Yeah, I think like for example, Silicon Slopes versus Silicon Valley. I think the people are different in both. I think Silicon Valley still is probably creating more of an engineering and design landscape. And Silicon Valley, I think, might be more marketing and sales oriented. Some of that just might be because of like some of the bigger industries or businesses here, like whether it's like the Vivint or summer sales programs or the LDS missionaries. But if you go to Silicon Valley, like that kind of sales mindset is much harder to find. You basically get a bunch of like, I don't know, liberal arts degree history majors who are like, well, I'm not going to code, I'm going to sell. And here it's like they grew up learning how to sell. So I think that's one of the biggest differences between the two. And you need both. So actually, I've seen a lot of Silicon Valley companies saying, we've built the MVP, we've got the product humming. Now we actually need to build the go-to-market. And like, who are we going to go to? Who are we going to bring on? And a lot of the time it's like, let's go to Utah. Let's go to places like, Salt Lake City or Provo and bring on the team that drove Qualtrics or Instructure, et cetera.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it also depends kind of what you're building. I mean, my first business in Utah was a consumer app, and man, it was a struggle to raise money. It was a struggle to get the right connections. It was tough to hire people with the right skill sets. When we pivoted to more of a B2B SaaS play, whoa, the world opened up to us in Utah, right? Like we had investors that would talk to us. They understood the business model. They knew how, like they had the right connections, the right people. There's like Scott mentioned, a lot of people in Utah that have built go-to-market teams, sales teams here where you're just, direct sales and, pounding the pavement. You hire a bunch of summer salespeople or former LDS missionaries who've been knocking doors for years. And it can be a lot easier to build that here than maybe other places. And it's easier to build that in Utah than it would be a consumer app. Now, if you're building something different, like I honestly think, there's going to be AI companies coming out of everywhere. But if you are a cutting edge AI company, you're probably best served in Silicon Valley. That's where the talent is. That's where people have been spending a lot of time on kind of the cutting edge there.
Are you referring
investors are probably more used to it.
Are you referring to AI companies as models, or are you referring to like AI enhanced companies or enabled companies like some of us?
No, I'm talking more like the cutting edge, like models and foundational AI type stuff.
I think like I agree with both of you. I made a decision to come to Utah like 10 years ago during the middle of my first startup, and it was a great decision. The labor pool I was dealing with in California, granted we were not in San Francisco, we were in Southern California, but it was really difficult to find. I know. It was very difficult to find the labor that we were looking for, and I knew that Utah was becoming a hotbed, and I for sure knew that we could find better salespeople there. Sometime later, in my next startup, sometime in like 2018, I'm raising a round of funding, and I'm in New York City at Insight Ventures office, And I may have shared this story with you guys before, but there's a partner there who's still there. She's doing really well. Her name's Rebecca. And I was sitting down with her, and she helped source a couple of the large deals in Utah, including later Divvy. But this was even pre-Divvy, and they were having a conversation, and our sales were exploding at the time. And I'm like, hey, we're selling. Boom, read them, read this data. And she was so unimpressed. And I was like, what's it? What,
Maybe was
and
it
she
upside
said,
down? Was she not reading?
yeah, yeah. Did you?
You have the chart
Yeah,
going down and to the
yeah.
left instead of
And
up
she
and to the right.
goes,
Hold on.
she goes, she goes, yeah, of course you're growing. You're in Utah. Utah companies sell really well and they build bad products. And I was like, wow, thank you for being so honest. And she said that, sales in Utah is what we're good at, and we're not as good at building products. And so we see the converse problem in San Francisco, right? And I think it has a lot to do with what you both have said about like our community and what we're good at. Also think about this based on what Brandon said. If you're going to build a SaaS business, I think there's a lot of support in Utah. If you're going to build a consumer tech company, there's little to no support in Utah because consumer products are a lot more difficult to just pound the phone and force people to buy it. But
Yep.
with B2B SaaS, it's much easier for it lends to our advantages in Utah because we know how to sell.
So I'll tell you why I did. So talent, customers, capital. I
Mhm.
built eVisit in Arizona, 10 year journey. Our seed investors came out of Utah. So I spent a lot of time here, and I think it was unnecessarily difficult because what you get in Arizona, I have two hypotheses around like what makes a terrific market for building. One is geographical constraints. And if you look at New York, San Francisco, there's like a high density population that's bumping into each other a lot. And so you tend to get this level of friction, and it makes it easier to compare, which drives like if I'm seeing Chad every day and he's growing at 100% a month, and I get to know Chad very quickly, I'm like, well, I know Chad. He's smart, but I can do what Chad's done because he's very accessible to me,
No,
right?
we can't.
Well, I could try. Um,
Just kidding.
and then
Yes, you can.
the second is culture. So if you look at like, there's pretty strong culture in New York. There's pretty strong culture in San Francisco, right? Like, and whether you come into it or you've been in it, you tend to, and what makes a great company is culture. So in Utah, there's a very strong culture, and whether you're like a member of the faith here, the predominant faith here or not, you're at least familiar with it. And so it makes it easier to create culture and to create alignment and to create shared values. And then the other thing that Utah has created is you have SaaS companies or software or technology companies that have now started, grown up, and exited. And so you have talent from those companies who've seen the movie before. And there's a huge advantage to having seen the movie before, right? You know which corners to look around. There's a monster around that corner. You may not know what form the monster's taking. Is it Frankenstein or is it the from the deep lagoon, whatever? Like, but there's one there, and so you can start
Keep
to.
going with the analogy. I
Yeah,
think a
yeah.
couple
Thank
more
you.
examples.
Do you have a favorite monster? I could.
But even like, yes, the talent is important from those companies, but also capital comes, right? Because you've had these successes. You had kind of this first wave of successes that led to the next wave that's leading to this kind of third wave of success. And
You have early talent that goes and start new companies because of that,
right,
right? Like,
right. Or they got exits and so they can go and start a new company, or they invest in VCs, their LPs and VCs here, or whatever. And I mean, that's an important thing too. I mean, Utah has a lot going for it if you're the right type of company for Utah. Interesting you bring up, culture, Brett. There's a lot of strengths to that culture, but I also feel like there's some weaknesses. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Like, what are the weaknesses in Utah that maybe we could work on and as a area get better at?
I don't think I've been here long enough to opine on the weaknesses. Like, I think the culture can feel exclusive sometimes. Right? Like I've heard from
Definitely.
VCs out of state, they're like, I just haven't figured out how to break in, and it feels very much like a club. Which so I think that becomes difficult. But I haven't been here long enough to highlight like where we improve. Scott and Chad probably have better perspectives on that.
I think my
Yeah.
initial thought, like, when I moved here in, I think, 2022, I had been coming to Utah for the sort of prior 18 months, once a month. We had an office here. My family lived here. Basically, I was coming to visit my parents. Um, the main thing that I noticed, particularly when I started spending more time with like CEOs and VCs here, is there was always sort of like an undercurrent of trying to figure out if you were LDS, and like almost including some language or like things that you did or you didn't do. And it felt really jarring to me. I grew up in New Jersey. It's a
Do you
lot of
want to go
Jewish, a
get
lot
a
of Catholic
beer?
folks. Yeah, exactly. And so I think people are like trying to figure out who you are, where you fit, where you sit, what you care about. And like honestly, like a lot of the time I just like ignored it. I didn't even address it. I didn't go into it. But I do think, I'll give you an example. And this is actually not related at all to running the company, but me and my dad went up to buy a golf cart up in like Camas or Midway, I think. And this guy who was trying to sell us the golf cart, he basically started, it was like he was trying to build rapport based off, he recognized I was LDS, that my dad was. And he was like, oh, when I was, this role in the church in this place doing this thing, it was like he was using that to build rapport with us, to sell to us, which I think any smart salesperson should build rapport with any way they can. But that really struck me, and I was surprised by it. I hadn't experienced it before. That's just one example. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say another example that's like very clear in my mind. I've shared this example a few times, but in running my last company, I had a board. There were several members of the board, and I had investors who were out of state because everybody and their mom in Utah invested in Podium already, and I wasn't part of that cool kids club. So we raised money outside of Utah, and
My
I
mom
had
said
one.
sorry, by the way, Chad.
You're welcome. I appreciate that. But one family office here in Utah had wrote a check and they were on the board, and so we're all in, doing the pleasantries and about to start a quarterly board meeting in person. This was back when things were in person. It was awesome. And this one board member from Utah who is LDS started just kind of popping off to my CFO about, you know, tons of just LDS jargon, right? Like leadership terms and what he did at this time in his life and this and that. And I've got two other people who know nothing about the LDS faith and that. And it immediately made them quiet
Yep.
because they didn't know how to talk to it. And these other two were just kind of going back and forth. I chewed out that board member after in the nicest way I could. And I said, I know you didn't mean anything by it, but you just completely excluded these people and made them feel like they couldn't be part of whatever conversation we were about to have just in the way you were having it.
Did you ask
Dude,
to
that's
start
awesome.
the session with the prayer though, like before you started with people?
That's funny. But
Oh my gosh.
he got it, and this was, and for people to have some context, I am LDS, and I keep people on their toes because I swear I cuss a little bit, but I still love Jesus, and they don't really know like, is this guy Mormon or not? And that's fine. They can just kind of figure that out on their own. Um, but like I was very, despite my activity in my faith in the church, I was very open with the fact that I have like 60% of my workforce are not LDS. And we never want to make them feel like there's an us versus them. So yeah, it's a problem, I think in some aspects.
Can we talk about like the workforce? Because I do feel like Utah has this very entrepreneurial culture, right?
Definitely.
And a lot of people want to start a business, and I don't think that is maybe maybe the concentration of people who want to start a business is higher here than other places. I don't know that is
I think it's true,
normal.
Brandon.
It do you,
I think it's true.
so
Yeah, it's
so
very true.
when we talk about talent, like yeah, there is a lot of talent. There's a lot of sales talent. But do you guys find it's also kind of a two-edged sword where it's hard to find like great people? And maybe one of the pros of Utah is like we have some amazing outdoor, recreational stuff that you can do. It's very family friendly. Most people have families. Is that a two-edged sword as well? Because people, they would much rather be out in the mountains than in the office, getting stuff done. Or, when they go home and on weekends they're disconnected and maybe not, diving in and with a startup, it takes energy. It takes a lot of focus and time. I mean, have you guys seen that as like a two-edged sword, or do you feel like it's more benefit or more the opposite?
I think it's a benefit. Yeah, I think it's a benefit.
So like one of the things that I definitely saw when we started hiring here, I think we saw two different things. So one was every day 4:45 without fail. It was like pack up, leave, and sometimes earlier. Like I got to get home to take my kids to sports, or I got to get home for dinner with my family. And it's like absolutely everyone had that. And it was really interesting and different. Like when I lived in the Bay Area, I was 30 and like the only guy at Facebook on my team of like, that I could remember that had as many kids as I had and was married. I mean, there might have been like some, a couple other folks who were married and maybe had a baby, but I had like a 6-year-old, like a 4-year-old. So I think one of the biggest challenges I felt was like sometimes it just felt lonely. Like, the end of the day came and people are gone and you're still grinding away. Having said that, though, typically like our executive team were always the type of folks who just kept going and kept engaging. And that may have been like they took a break and some time for their family, but they came back later in the evening and were chatting with me at night as I like pulled data and they were writing code. I think the other thing too that I saw is, maybe it's sort of a consequence of the types of folks who live in Utah versus that live in the coastal cities. But, the women that I worked with, for example, who went out on maternity leave, they in the Bay Area, they typically came back, whatever the time period was later. A lot of the women I worked with here, they didn't come back. So anyway, just two very different things. It was sort of like I had my kid. I'm a stay-at-home mom now. I'm not coming back to work. And it was always a bit of a surprise here, whereas in the Bay Area, like we expected at least the percentage was a lot higher.
Well, interesting. So the jury's out. I'll let you guys know in 10 years.
I just want to say I've loved it here and I've loved building a business here, but we're not perfect either, but it's been awesome and I would highly recommend it. So welcome, Brett. We're excited to have you.
Excited to be here.
Good luck. Good luck, dude.
Okay. So
hopefully you're Mormon, because
we'll find out. If I'm not yet, I will be.
Just kidding.
So this week, Amjad Masad tweeted a surprising insight. AI coding is profoundly benefiting product and design teams, but not saving engineering time. So I think one of the big things that I've heard over and over again is like, it turns every engineer into a 10 times engineer. Or, I think there's actually a lot of noise about how much productivity AI is getting people. And I don't know that that's actually true. And then there was a response about that it's actually not helping the engineers themselves, but rather enabling non-engineers, i.e. product people, to start contributing to the product and to the code in different ways. So Brandon, are we underestimating AI's impact beyond engineering for engineering?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And you talk about all the noise that's in the market, right? And I think that noise comes from these CEOs at Google or Meta or wherever, and they're saying, yeah, 30% of our code is written by AI right already. And the reality is that's probably true. And what Amjad is saying here is also probably true, where now those engineers are spending less time on just writing the code and they're spending more time on debugging it and making sure that, it's working correctly. And, I this was a while ago, so this is outdated numbers, right? But, we had one of our lead developers over here, when we would talk to him about, hey, are you using AI? He's like, yeah, I used to spend, like, I don't remember what he said, but I used to spend 80% of my time writing code and 20% of my time debugging it. And now I spend 20% of my time writing code and 80% of my time debugging it. And so I think both are right. Like, it's probably not advancing, engineering quite as fast as maybe people were implying that it would. But what I think is super cool about what Amjad is saying is, like, hey, the benefit though is still really strong for people outside. Like, if you're a PM and you're able to create a prototype and give that to an engineer and say, now harden this because this is what I want. Like, that definitely could speed up engineering time instead of, the back and forth, the coordination that used to happen between a PM and an engineer, and the engineer needing all the little details and the PM having to write all of that out. So I think it definitely could. It's Scott talked about how they had a time where everyone was just coming together and just, they coded, really fast, and they were just building something. I don't remember what, like, they were doing it for the whole company. And it's like CTO is teaching people how to use Replit. And so now the salesperson who has this idea that would really benefit him, can go and just build his own little thing, right? And doesn't have to rely on engineering. Or I think, was it Amjad or, in the I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his first name, but Oros, right? In his post where he's talking about, like, the HR person on his, like, on a team that he had talked to where they needed a tool internally, and now they could just go kind of vibe code it, and instead of needing engineering resources, could just, do it themselves. I mean, that is what's going to speed up engineering, I believe.
So Chad, I mean, your whole business is built around like, or initially had been built around helping getting access to technical talent.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in your business and with your customers? Like, are you seeing an acceleration for engineering, and like how and or not? Like, what are you seeing?
Everybody's hiring everything. I think we have a lot of talking heads out in the market right now. I don't think people know shit yet. I think that there are movements in the market, and there are changes coming. There are changes that have already started. But as we talk about engineering specifically, yes, it's an easy argument to say that there is an offset of supply and demand compared to what we used to have. What we used to have was extremely high demand and low supply. Like 5 years ago, it was what was it? It was either Harvard or Stanford did a study that for every one computer science grad, there were 10 open roles in engineering. And so I believe that we've sort of right-sized the market a little bit more, and we are still feeling demand for hiring people, which is great. But yes, in our company, like a year and a half ago, close to 2 years ago, we started opening other non-technical roles. But we started there because that was the highest demand, easiest place to find product market fit. However, like, the question is really, is this, are these like tech-enabled, AI code editors like Cursor and others, are they really, really improving, like, the amount of code written? I would say at least 30% of our code is enhanced or enabled by AI at distro. However, I think it would be a little sophomoric for us to assume that that's all an engineer does. I think that right now it's giving us ability for our teams to spend more time being thoughtful about how to be an engineer and how to ship quality code. So, and we all know this, like, your teams, like, the engineers are not just coding literally all day, right? They're stopping to think and architect and decide how to make a function, or how to make sure that it's a microservice and not accidentally monolithic. So like there's things that they should be doing, um, and I think that the AI is enabling more of that. Also, the amount of code shipped has no bearing on the quality of code shipped. Does that make sense? Like in a lot of ways, AI should be improving the quality of code, and sometimes that might be allowing an engineer to go faster, and sometimes that might be allowing an engineer to produce a better product.
Well, one of the things I've found, like I've started copying and pasting code to slap together prototypes, that like working prototypes. And the thing that's still missing, which will be solved, is when you're asking for AI to like give you code to accomplish a certain thing. It's not my projects haven't had the full context of everything else that's going on, so I get something that'll work there. But as an anecdote, I have an engineer, our data science engineer, our data engineer, who he delivered a new backend database over the weekend, and I had a one-on-one with him already planned shortly after that. I was like, "Man, awesome work! That's terrific." I was like, how did you do that so quickly? He's like, "Well, before that would have been a 6-week project, because I would have spent the first 3 weeks building the environment, and then I would have gotten in there and found something wrong. And then I would spend the next 3 weeks sifting through um, Substack or Reddit trying to find how to solve these technical problems that I was running up against. But I just, every time I got an error, I'd give it to Perplexity or ChatGPT, and I was able to get there way, way faster. But to Brandon's point, the 80-20 thing of writing and debugging, I actually wonder if the debug, it's an interesting thought, because I think they're actually delivering more functional code, or they're able to, and they're spending more of their time figuring out which databases got cross-referenced wrong, or like it's we're definitely seeing our designer has started vibe coding, and our engineers are now giving feedback on how bad the code is, but but it allows you to transfer an idea, like it should look and work this way. So to Brandon's point, like now go harden it, right? Like go make sure it's usable. We're definitely seeing it though.
Yeah,
Scott, go ahead. Sorry, Brandon.
I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was, I think it's Martin Casado is how you pronounce his name, or Casado. He's a partner at A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, right? And
We need cooler names, guys. Our names are way too boring. Everybody we quote here has cooler names than us.
Yeah,
seriously.
Well, he was talking about it. And he's like, all the people he knows, all the developers he knows, are getting excited about coding again, because where they used to have to spend all this time setting up their environment, like they don't anymore, or like, so they're coding at nights now because it's fun again, and they're able to just focus on the creative portion, which is what they wanted to do in the first place. And I think that's also an interesting thing that might be, accelerating things as well, is where before it just got to a point where developers had to spend so much time and install, so much and set up their environments. And it was just crazy before you could even, start coding. I remember we hired some developers, and Jason's like, yeah, the first week, Jason's my CTO. He's like, yeah, their first, few days, they're just going to be spending, setting up their environment. I'm like, what? Like, this is crazy. And so now, I think AI is maybe taking some of that off of their plates, where they can just get back to the part that they actually really enjoy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying earlier, right? Like there's a lot of other things that produces a more quality experience in engineering. Engineering isn't just typing on the keyboard, right?
I think also there's just like part of this thing where like the point of vibe coding sort of is like, oh, well, I don't know how to code, so now I can. And I think there's a lot of developers and engineers who are like, I do know how to code, why would I use it? And then when they do use it, it doesn't live up to their expectations of what it should be. It's not as good, and so it slows them down. So I think there's like a, I think, and sorry, I dropped for a second, but like, I tend to believe that we've more like Gurgley or Georgely or however you pronounce his name. Like I'm more in line with his position, which is you've unlocked more of the team who can now build and code, as opposed to, like the engineers are absolutely going to be 20% more productive. Having said that, though, we had a hackathon this last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We've got like 8 to 10 new features ready to ship, things that people have wanted to ship, but it's sort of like we follow our roadmap, et cetera. But one of the things that we did to start off the hackathon was basically teach the whole team or anyone who was willing to join, like this tool. Like, so for example, we did, I think maybe I mentioned this last week, but we talked about like Replit and Lovable. And then at the high end, sort of like being able to look at your code base, the context, and write code was like Windsurf and others. And one of our developers was like, this is awesome. I actually had never really looked at these tools or this specific tool. I used it and I was able to write the feature faster and kind of check my work. And it was interesting because I was partially thinking like, why don't you get the hype? Like I get it. Like, why would you not be so deep in it? But a lot of this is just like a reorientation of your brain, like the plasticity. I think it's just hard to change. So it's just getting people to be excited about it and change.
But yeah, that's totally true. It's kind of surprising how many laggards there are still. I mean, it's been like usable for a couple of years now. But like from what I understand, for those that are not technical and can better understand the situation, we're talking about something that is helpful versus like it's just very different situations. Having a PM use Replit to just have a no code environment to go create an app is very different in quality and usability versus an AI enabled code editor like Cursor, right? Cursor is still going to allow the engineer to dictate quality, right? It's not building a whole application for you. What it's doing is suggesting and prompting functions and lines of code as you go. It's like predict text, enter, predict text, enter, versus Replit. Let me describe what this app should do. Make it do this and that and change it in this way. So that's very different, right? Like we're talking about people that don't know how to program versus people that do know how to program and are enhancing, but they are still totally directing the quality of what's in front of them. They're writing the code essentially.
Right.
It's very different.
Well, for this episode, we tackled big shifts in your business and what to do about them. We debated the merits of startup city selections, and we unpacked the surprising real-world impacts of AI across company teams. If today's insights sparked your interest, hit like, subscribe, and follow Cereal for Lunch, part of your well-balanced startup diet.